With the play of Mark Vientos, Jose Iglesias, and now Luisangel Acuña, do the New York Mets have angels in the infield this season?
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com. This episode is brought to you by Booking.com, Booking.yeah. The right stay can make you a fan of any city, even your baseball rivals. Book today on Booking.com, the official accommodation partner of Major League Baseball. Get the Booking.com app today. Now, for those of you who are looking for my reaction to the Mets victory over the Phillies, I did a live stream right after the game ended on the Locked On Mets YouTube channel, breaking down everything from the game. So if you found this episode first today and you want my just gut reaction to everything that happened, breaking down every big moment from that unbelievable victory against the Phillies, you can find that on the YouTube channel or on your podcast feed if you're listening to this show first. You go back. It's the episode that has Edwin Diaz and a bunch of exclamation points in the title. Can't remember exactly what it was. Something about Edwin Diaz coming up clutch for the Mets. But what I wanted to do today here with this additional show is sort of set the stage for what I plan to do throughout a postseason run that at this point we really think it's going to happen, and that is giving you sort of a post-game reaction as well as a follow-up the next day that is more of a pre-game show, something that sets the stage or something to talk about some big running theme with this team. And that's why I wanted to do an episode I've been thinking about since, I want to say it was Friday, when I recorded an episode of Who's Better Baseball, another podcast that I do. And on the show, we had a commenter who I believe might be a fan of me in this show because I've seen him comment on Locked On Mets episodes as well as Who's Better episodes. And he goes by Yuki Matsui on YouTube. He has a picture of the pitcher from the Padres. I don't think it's actually Yuki. It's sending me comments on my live streams from the trainer's table, but you never know. But Yuki made a comment about how the Mets have angels in the infield this year. And it really resonated because you think about what's happened this season, and the play of the Mets infielders has really been the catalyst, starting with Francisco Lindor, but getting outsized production from guys like Jose Iglesias and Mark Vientos is a real reason why the Mets are here. And now I'm recording this show for Monday, September 23rd. And a week ago, the title of my Locked On Mets episode was Can the Mets Win Without Francisco Lindor? And if you remember where we were at a week ago, just a week ago, before this homestand, there was a lot of doubts. Okay, the Mets coming off a series loss, a tough one in Philly. You come back home, you got 3 against the Nationals, and of course, that felt like an easy series, but you had to sweep it. You couldn't just win it. And then you had the Phillies coming into town for 4 games. How are the Mets going to fare without their MVP? How many games is he going to be out? If I told you on Monday Lindor was not going to play in any of these games, you would have thought it was bad news for the Mets. But they went 6-1 in their final homestand of the season, and that moved their record, as Mike Mayer pointed out on Twitter. It's a great follow. Check him out. Over the last 45 games played at Citi Field this season, the Mets went 33-12. Just unbelievable. The vibes outside of the ballpark after this game were insane, by the way. Under the 7 line, to see all these fans, playing music and just mosh pitting together and just exuberance. It's crazy that we've reached this point. And this season, as I'll continue to cover episode over episode, it's my favorite of my tenure here hosting Locked On Mets. It's been such an unbelievable season because the New York Mets, since that infamous meeting that we've covered time and again, where Francisco Lindor locked the doors of the clubhouse after Jorge Lopez launched his glove into the stands, and the Mets had that horrible May and said, it's time for some accountability. We can still make something of this season. The Mets have been the best team in baseball by record, 101 game span. That is a majority of a season where this team has been the best in the game. And then you think about what happened this week and this idea of angels in the infield. First game against the Nationals, that was One of the closest ones all week. Really, this week was bookended by crazy close games. A walk-off in extras, first game against Washington. Final game against Philly, a 2-1 thriller where Edwin Diaz delivers. And again, check out that show because what a game that was. But if you're thinking about all the moments that led us to this crazy week for the Mets that we all watched, the 6-1 week, Sean and I was brilliant in that first game against Jake Irvin. But Jake Irvin for the Nationals was really good as well. And the Mets trailed 1-0 in the bottom of the 8th inning. Tyrone Taylor leadoff double. But a couple batters later, he's standing on third base with 2 outs. And you thought that he was going to get stranded. Jose Iglesias rips one up the middle at the pitcher Derek Law, who can't field it cleanly, can't pick it up cleanly when he tries to get to it, as Iglesias is booking it down the line as he always does. And he gets to first without a throw, gets the infield single, drives in the run, ties the game. In extra innings, top of the 10th, runner on second base, the Nationals execute a sacrifice bunt, runners on third with 1 out, infield drawn in, ground ball to Luisangel Acuña, who did not start that game. Eddie Alvarez did. But Acuña makes all the big plays down the stretch in the field with all that pressure on him. I talked about it during the broadcast tonight, the ESPN one, how Acuña let it be known to whoever he was talking with, because Eduardo Perez, that he was shaken going out to the field in that game. But once he got his legs under him, once he made some plays, everything sort of slowed down for him. We've seen that all week. But he makes those big plays. Starling Marte walks it off, and you survive to get that first win. Then, next 2 nights, you blow out the Nationals. Just trounce them. 10 runs each game. First of those games, Acuña delivers the first run, RBI double. Pete Alonso drives in the next 2 with Acuña and Iglesias scoring. That's all out of your infield. And he drove in those runs on a pop-up, speaking of angels in the infield, where Joey Gallo doesn't catch the ball. If he does, who knows what happens? Instead, that ball drops, 2 runs scored. Mark Vientos drives in another one, makes it a 4-run rally. Francisco Alvarez hits a home run. Pete Alonso hits a 3-run shot. Acuña caps off the game with a homer, 10 runs. Combined between Iglesias, Alonso, and Acuña, the Mets infield, outside of Mark Vientos, who went 0 for 4, went 9 for 13 with 7 runs scored and 7 RBIs, and Vientos got a sac fly. Final game versus the Nationals, again, they trounced them, had a 9-run inning. Acuña caps it off with another homer. First game of this series against Philly. Mark Vientos and Pete Alonso, your corner infielders, go back-to-back. Then Iglesias sets the table later for a 2-run homer by Brandon Nimmo. Then there's a 5-run 4th inning where Alvarez hits a 3-run homer. Iglesias sets the table for Nimmo again, drives him in with a double. Then Mark Vientos drives in Nimmo for the 9th run of the game. 10th run, once again, comes via Luisangel Acuña, RBI triple. First time in Mets history they've scored 10 runs in 3 consecutive games. Mets blow game 2 to Philly. Game 3, they bounce back. It's Alvarez and Acuña who each homer in the second inning of that game to erase the Kyle Schwarber homer and give the Mets an early lead. Game gets tied up when Nick Castellanos goes yard. Nimmo breaks the tie in the 7th with an RBI single. Alvarez then gives the Mets 2 more with an RBI double. And then again, you get an insurance run off the bat of Pete Alonso where an infielder doesn't catch a pop-up. Bryson Stott should have caught that ball, drops in. Mets score another run. Edwin Diaz gets the 4-out save. Then you have tonight. And this is the biggest moment that fits into this narrative of angels in the infield. 9th inning, Edwin Diaz on the mound. Mets clinging to a 2-1 lead. Bryson Stott's on the bases. He already stole second. 0-2 pitch to J.T. Realmuto. Slider low and away, strikes him out. Tough pitch to throw on. Stott's running to third. And instead of eating it like he should have, Francisco Alvarez almost blows the game and fires a dart right at the third base bag. That ball, if it hits in front of the bag, it's in the outfield. Okay? If it hits any other part of the bag than whatever little quadrant it hits, it could have bounced left, it could have bounced right, it could have trickled away any which way. And Bryson Stott scores, and it's a tied game, and all the momentum is gone. But carried by the wings of angels, that ball drills the base and pops straight up and comes down. Mark Vientos, no idea where the ball was, and it just drops right in front of him, right into his hands, basically. If I'm not mistaken, it dropped on the ground and bounced up, and he caught it with a bare hand. And Bryson Stott has to stay on third. Edwin Diaz walks a batter, but then has the big strikeout to end the game. Mets win that series. They avoid the Phillies clinching in their ballpark, and they set the stage with a 2-game lead going into Atlanta with the chance to win that series and clinch a playoff berth. What's happened throughout this week with the Mets infielders and what's just happened on plays in the infield hits, everything else, it's been remarkable. And this really extends back, as I said. You look at this run for the New York Mets. It all started when Mark Vientos got the keys to third base and Jose Iglesias came into the ball club after spending the first couple months in Syracuse. Those things don't happen. Where would the Mets be? I want to talk about that next. The production year long the Mets have got from their infielders. We'll go through that next. First, though, quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode of Locked On Mets is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.yeah. Summer travel heating up, especially travel for baseball games. It's time to explore those U.S. cities you've always secretly want to learn more about. Yes, we're talking about your rival cities, and there's two to come to mind right now. The Mets head to Atlanta to potentially clinch a playoff berth, and if they don't do it there, they'll have another opportunity in Milwaukee where they could also be playing a wild card series. So if you want to follow the Mets wherever this journey takes them throughout the rest of the season, make sure you go to Booking.com, because with hotels, bed and breakfasts, vacation rentals, resorts, and so much more on Booking.com, you might just find your perfect stay, even in your baseball rival city. The right stay can make you a fan of any U.S. city, even your rivals. Book today on Booking.com on the site or in the Booking.com app. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. It's the best way to view NFL games if you want to bet and get in on the action. You'll get started as well with a $200 bonus in bonus bets. So that's guaranteed, okay? When you place your first $5 bet, you're going to get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's FanDuel.com, America's #1 sports book. Stay up to date with all the latest in the world of sports when you check out Locked On Sports Today, streaming 24/7 on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube today, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. The goal is to get to 10,000 subscribers by the end of the season, so I appreciate all of you who continue to subscribe. Let's talk about this Mets infield a little bit. On September 7th, Jeff McNeil hits the IL. Jose Iglesias set to play every day at second. Remember, in the second half, Jeff McNeil subscribed to Angels in the Infield as he had a .923 OPS after being abysmal in the first half. 7 home runs, 12 doubles in 41 games, 20 RBIs, 22 runs scored. He was the Mets' second best hitter in the second half outside of Lindor at the point when he went down. So losing him seemed to be a huge, huge loss, and it is still one that is felt with this team because he provides such great versatility. But Iglesias slides into the lineup that game where McNeil gets hit by the pitch, gets a hit off the bench, and since then has been on a 16-game hitting streak. Now, mind you, in that game that Iglesias came in, it was the one where Mark Vientos led off the scoring for the Mets with a 2-run homer and then capped it with a walk-off homer in extra innings. So just another little moment for the Mets infield. On this homestand, Lindor is out. Iglesias is tasked with batting leadoff. He got 6 multi-hit games out of the 7. And the game that he started in the leadoff spot on Saturday in Philly when Lindor was out, he also had a multi-hit game. So 7 out of 8 games in the leadoff spot since Lindor's back injury, he has had multi-hit games while continuing a hitting streak that started when Jeff McNeil went down. In September, Jose Iglesias is hitting .384, playing every day. In June, when he was still a platoon player with McNeil, getting a little bit of limited time, he hit .417. On the season, Jose Iglesias is hitting .337 with a .381 on base. He's a career .280 hitter, career .320 on base guy. So do the math on how much better he's been than his career averages. Also, his career OPS is .710. This year, .840. Best season of his career was 2013 when he batted .303 with a .735 OPS. Again, this year, .337, .840 OPS. He's about a 2.5 win player through 79 games. That's half of a season. Over a full year, the production the Mets have gotten This is a 5-win player. You're talking about Jeff McNeil production in 2022, where he won a batting title. That's how good Jose Iglesias has been. And that's not even accounting for the great defense and the leadership, the vibes that he's brought to this clubhouse with OMG and everything else. The Mets took off like a wagon when Iglesias came up to replace Brett Baty. It started with getting rid of Joey Wendell and rolling with a platoon of Vientos and Baty, which led to Vientos earning the starting spot. And then you bring in Iglesias, and that's been half of your infield for a lot of this run. And they have been unbelievable for guys who started the year in Syracuse who you weren't expecting anything from necessarily. I mean, yeah, we thought Vientos would come up in spurts, hit some home runs, maybe be a DH if JD Martinez went down. We never envisioned, even at the start of the season or start of the spring training before JD Martinez was signed, we never imagined a world where Mark Vientos would be the starting third baseman of the New York Mets. Honestly, throughout his entire time as a prospect, we probably never envisioned that because the glove was always a question. And you might look at the metrics and they might tell you he's bad at defensive run save, outs above average. He's got a great arm that's accurate, and he makes most of the plays that are hit at him. You know, is there a pop-up that's probably dropped that he could have caught at some point? Yes. Is there a ball that has gone through the hole between third and short that another third baseman maybe grabs? Sure, but he is not a liability at third base, and that is a huge improvement. Meanwhile, he has 25 home runs in 106 games with 67 runs driven in, 841 OPS. We've talked about how his numbers are right there with all the best third basemen in baseball. If you look at the rate stats, and if you look at what he's done since he joined the fold, he's been, by some statistics you might look at, the best offensive third baseman in baseball. If you look at his pace stats per 162, he'd be on pace for 38 home runs and 102 runs driven in. It's been remarkable what the Mets have gotten from Mark Vientos. And then now with Lindor down, here comes Luisangel Acuña, who I told you earlier this week, he had among qualified hitters in Syracuse in the international league that they play in, AAA. There's 81 qualified hitters who have played enough to be considered a qualified hitter in that league. Acuña was 78th out of 81 in OPS. He was by on-base plus slug, as simple of an offensive stat that you can find that tells you how a guy's performing. One of the worst hitters in that league comes up to the Mets, and he's been unbelievable, hitting 379, slugging 828. He had 7 home runs all year in Syracuse, has 3 this week, 2 doubles and a triple, 6 extra base hits. It's been remarkable what he's done, and now he might have to continue to cover for Francisco Lindor because the back injury is still there, and we'll talk about that a little bit in the final segment. But speaking of Lindor, you have that element of this team too. It all starts in the infield because the Mets are not in this position to have the homestand they just did if not for Francisco Lindor and his leadership in his MVP caliber season. Yes, now we look at Shohei Ohtani, 53-53, had a huge home run today. Sure, you look back at some of my takes a couple weeks ago, they look pretty bad where I said Lindor is going to be the MVP. But what I also said was Lindor at that point had matched Shohei Ohtani in the MVP race. And we would see who finished stronger. Ohtani has put 3 exclamation points on his MVP case. He's been insane. He deserves it. But Lindor deserves to be the runner-up. And I still believe the heart of most valuable. Lindor is the most valuable player in the National League this year if you really are boiling down value to leadership, impact on both sides, what he's meant to his team. The Mets are not in this position without Francisco Lindor, but here they are without him, still thriving. And last week I did a show, Can the Mets Win Without Francisco Lindor? And I was looking at the homestand that lied ahead. Now I'd say hopefully he comes back, but can the Mets go on a run without Francisco Lindor? It's going to take more outsized production from Jose Iglesias, Mark Vientos, and Luisangel Acuña, but they haven't shown us any signs of slowing down. And that's what's made this run so much fun because of how unexpected it is and how unbelievable some of these guys have been. So we'll see how it all plays out from here. Hopefully Lindor can get back And Acuna can become a complementary piece to everything the Mets have going on here. Will they get him back? I want to talk about Lindor's injury update to close out the show. We'll get to that in just a minute. First, though, another quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. Prize Picks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps on Prize Picks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections. You watch the winnings roll in. Get on the daily action with your friends and become part of the Prize Picks community today. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. So you can turn $10 into $1,000. Prize Picks is the best way to win real money this football season. Which players are going off, which ones aren't. Make your picks in less than 60 seconds and turn your sports opinions into real money all season long on Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the code LOCKEDONMLB. You're going to get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. If you're an everyday listener of the show, make sure to become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service where you get updates from me. Anytime news breaks in the Mets, you can ask me questions anytime. You can also take part in our Locked On Mets signed photo giveaways, and you get the lineup graphic sent to your phone each day so you know who's in the starting lineup without ever having to go on social media. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find a link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Now, Francisco Lindor met with the media after the game to give his update on where he's at when it comes to his back injury. He said that today he accomplished what he wanted to. Every day, the trainers sort of set a framework of what they want him to accomplish. He has to push himself to the limit each day. And it was, in his words, another slow step in the right direction. We learned that throwing doesn't hurt for him. He talked about how he's done everything but take live BP or run the bases and actually touch the bases, right? He's done dead sprints and everything else, but he hurt his back running past second base. So that's the other element of the little bit of torque that it puts on your body when you're running hard and actually touching those pillows. So you hear everything he said, and it's a really weird spot the Mets are in with this injury. He basically said that if he plays this year, it won't be pain-free. He essentially says he's not going to be 100%, right? But what he's hoping for through this process, what the trainers are hoping for, is that he's not playing in constant pain. What he talked about is when his back grabbed on him on Sunday in Philly, he couldn't bend over, struggled to walk. Like that was an extreme. He said today when he was pushing himself to his limit at one point, he started to feel it in his back, and that's when they laid off. But after going in and doing whatever they do to sort of ease it up a little bit, that pain alleviated. It went away. And it's sort of a come and go situation where Lindor just needs it to come and go and not just be constant, and then he can play through the pain. He talked about how players are always playing through something. This is a guy that played with a bone spur in his elbow last year. He had some other injury the year before in 2022 when he had such a great season as well. This guy posts every day, but that doesn't mean he's always healthy. It just means he's able to get his body in position to go out there and still deliver for the New York Mets. Oh, it was the hand injury in 2022. Remember he slammed his finger on the door of the hotel room and everything else. He had to play through that all year. This is a tough guy, and he wants to be out there with his teammates, but he can't go out there if he's not able to bend down, make plays, and be a close enough version to himself. Now, the question becomes, are the Mets a better team with whatever version of Francisco Lindor they get back, or Luisangel Acuña starting? And what we've watched in 1 week, it would indicate that Luisangel Acuña is right now, he looks like a rocket ship that you can look at being the starting second baseman for the Mets for a long time when Lindor is healthy, and he might just be a great player, far exceeding the expectations that we started to set for him after his down year in AAA. Maybe that's the case. Maybe this is the next star New York Mets middle infielder, and I hope so. What we saw in Syracuse, you can't ignore that entirely. And the league is going to adjust to him. So do I think that if Luisangel Acuña plays this whole next week, he's going to hit 380 again with 3 more home runs and a couple doubles and a triple? No way does he match that production. Now, can he come through in some big spots, get some clutch hits, still hit for a high average, still move the line when he comes up? Will he make every play at shortstop defensively? Yes, and that's the big part of this. Luisangel Acuña has not been much of a step back defensively from Francisco Lindor. And he's got the fresh, 22-year-old body, Luisangel Acuña. So athleticism alone at the shortstop position, Acuña is probably the better bet defensively. With that said, it's still Francisco Lindor. He's still your best player. You're still not here without him. And in a big spot when it comes to postseason experience and everything else, who do I one up? If it's game 3 of a wild card round, tie ball game, the Mets are facing whatever closer they're going up against. If it's Ranger Suarez for the Padres, or who's closing games for the Brewers? Is it back to Devin Williams? Might be. If you're in that situation, do I want Luisangel Acuña or Francisco Lindor up, even with Lindor's bulky back? I want Lindor batting. Lindor has come through in so many big moments. But it's hard to know what the Mets are going to get from him from this point on. When he says, I'm not going to play pain-free, that's a cause for concern, because also you want to think about the future. And I do believe the trainers have his career in mind when they're trying to get him ready. I don't think the Mets would do anything consciously that would jeopardize Francisco Lindor beyond this season. But you really never know, and back injuries can be a thing. I don't even have to tell you who I'm thinking of when I say back injuries can be a thing. Every Mets fan who has any bit of knowledge about this team that has been around for a little bit and watched the last decade play out knows exactly who I'm talking about. And he wore number 5. And you don't even want to put a connection between Wright and Lindor. They're connected in so many ways. Team captains, best all-around players that the Mets have had at those specific positions on the left side of the infield. 30-30 players. Guys who can win MVPs when they're at their absolute best. What was it, 2007 when Wright played through something and it could have changed the end of his career? I absolutely love what this team has done. And I believe that they can make a run regardless of who's playing shortstop. They have a better chance with their MVP there. But I think that other guys can continue to step up. I just hope that if Lindor comes back, he can contribute and he doesn't re-injure himself. And just like Lindor said, when asked about if he'd play this year, he said he wouldn't commit to playing this regular season, but he said he's optimistic. He said he believes in the Lord, believes in what the trainers are doing, and he says he believes he's doing everything he can each day to get back on the field. I do trust that process as well. Because if they were going to force him back, it would have happened at some point during this series. It would have happened tonight. Because considering the amount of baseball activity that he did, and from what he said, if it was a situation like last Sunday in Philly, and it was up to him, he probably would have been back out there. But they're trusting a process. In the meantime, though, the Mets have to be carried by angels in the infield with Jose Iglesias continuing to just get 2 hits every single game from the leadoff spot, somehow exceeding the production that you were getting when it comes to batting average and on base than what Lindor was giving you in the week prior. Like, how did that happen? Maybe it all works out. If Luisangel Acuña somehow slugs the way Lindor was slugging before he went down, maybe it'll all work out. Maybe this team is just too big when it comes to everything they've done over the last 4 months to be derailed by any one injury, any one guy going down. If that was going to happen, I feel like it would have happened this past week. So now you look ahead to a series in Atlanta, and if it is Acuña starting, what a subplot that is. Ronald Acuña Jr.'s little brother coming into Atlanta, a fan base that I'll tell you what, because I know some of them, They love Acuña's little brother. They loved him a lot more as a Rangers prospect. But they love Luisangel Acuña because of who his older brother is. And so if it is him sticking it to the Braves this week, wouldn't that be an incredible story to cap off what's been an incredible journey throughout this season? Anyway, that's going to be all for today's edition of Locked On Mets. Schedule for the rest of the week, I will be giving you a very in-depth preview of the Mets versus Braves to lead into that series on Tuesday. The Mets are obviously off today. Then we will continue to go game by game, reacting to these incredible playoff atmosphere-like games as the Mets look to notch their spot in October. And then we'll have a run to cover if they get there. As always, thank you so much for tuning in. If you are listening on the audio side, do me a favor, follow, rate, give the show a review. That really helps. If you're watching on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button. Goal is to get to 10,000 subscribers by the end of the season. We're getting closer and closer. So I appreciate all of you who continue to subscribe. You can follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listener, your first watch every day. Now, for your second watch, head over to YouTube and check out the first ever 24/7 streaming channel that covers everything, the world of sports. Talking about Locked On Sports Today with our local hosts from each team, league-wide hosts from each league. Find Locked On Sports Today streaming 24/7 on YouTube.